Long before skyscrapers pierced the clouds, Manhattan was a wild island of rocky hills, dense forests, and freshwater streams. The Lenape people called it Mannahatta, meaning island of many hills. They fished the surrounding waters, hunted deer through thick woodlands, and cultivated crops along fertile clearings. The island teemed with wildlife. Black bears, wild turkeys, and beavers built their dams and creeks that would one day become paved avenues. The Lenape maintained a sophisticated network of trails that crisscrossed the island, some of which later became the very roads New Yorkers walk today. Broadway itself follows the path of an ancient Lenape trail called the Wick-Quosgeck Road. For thousands of years, the Lenape thrived here, trading with neighboring nations and shaping the land with controlled burns that kept the forest open and productive. This was no empty wilderness waiting to be discovered. It was a managed, living landscape, home to a people whose deep connection to the island would soon be shattered by the arrival of strangers from across the Atlantic. In 1609, English explorer Henry Hudson sailed into the harbor aboard the Dutch ship Halve Mayen, searching for a northwest passage to Asia. He never found it, but what he reported back to the Dutch East India Company was perhaps more valuable, an island rich in beaver pelts. The Dutch wasted no time. By 1626, Director General Peter Minuit completed what became history's most legendary real estate transaction, acquiring Manhattan from the Lenape for 60 guilders worth of trade goods. The Lenape likely understood this as a shared use agreement, not a permanent sale. Regardless, the Dutch founded New Amsterdam at the island's southern tip, building a wooden fort, a church, and rows of gabled houses along muddy lanes. A wall of timber and earth was erected across the northern boundary to keep out threats. That wall would give Wall Street its name. New Amsterdam was never a quiet settlement. It was a chaotic, multilingual trading post where Dutch, English, German, French, African, and Lenape voices mixed in the streets. Enslaved Africans built much of the colony's infrastructure, laying roads and constructing buildings. By the 1650s, New Amsterdam had become the most diverse settlement in North America, a characteristic Manhattan has never lost. But the Dutch colony was small, and a rising English empire had its eyes firmly set on this strategic harbor. In 1664, 4 English warships sailed into the harbor and demanded the Dutch surrender New Amsterdam. Director General Peter Stuyvesant wanted to fight, but the colonists refused. The city changed hands without a single shot. New Amsterdam became New York, named after the Duke of York, and the English set about reshaping the colony in their image. Under English rule, Manhattan grew steadily. Trinity Church was built in 1697, its steeple becoming the tallest structure in the city. The Bolting Act gave New York a monopoly on flour exports, fueling economic growth. Taverns, coffee houses, and print shops sprang up along the widening streets. By the mid-1700s, New York was a prosperous colonial city with a population nearing 25,000. But prosperity bred resentment. When Britain imposed new taxes after the French and Indian War, New Yorkers were among the first to resist. The Sons of Liberty organized protests. And in 1765, delegates from 9 colonies met at Federal Hall on Wall Street for the Stamp Act Congress. When the Revolutionary War erupted in 1776, George Washington attempted to defend Manhattan, but was outmaneuvered by the British at the Battle of Brooklyn. The Continental Army retreated, and the British occupied Manhattan for 7 long years. A devastating fire destroyed a quarter of the city. When the British finally departed in November 1783, Washington marched triumphantly back into a battered but free New York. After the Revolution, Manhattan transformed at breathtaking speed. In 1789, George Washington took the oath of office at Federal Hall, making New York the nation's first capital. The city's population doubled every decade. In 1811, the Commissioner's Plan imposed a rigid street grid across Manhattan's hilly terrain, flattening nature into numbered avenues and streets, a radical act of urban engineering that would define the city forever. Waves of immigrants poured through the harbor. The Irish arrived fleeing famine in the 1840s, crowding into Lower East Side tenements. German, Italian, and Eastern European Jewish communities followed, each group reshaping neighborhoods in their image. By the 1850s, Manhattan was the most densely populated place in the Western world. The Civil War brought turmoil. In 1863, the draft riots exploded across Manhattan, the deadliest civil disturbance in American history. For 4 days, mobs burned buildings and attacked black residents. Federal troops were pulled from the Gettysburg Campaign to restore order. But from that chaos, Manhattan rebuilt and surged forward into the Gilded Age. Cornelius Vanderbilt built Grand Central Depot. Boss Tweed's Tammany Hall corruption machine ruled city politics. Central Park, designed by Frederick Law, Olmsted, and Calvert Vall, gave the crowded island a green sanctuary. The Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883, connecting Manhattan to Brooklyn with steel cables and granite towers. And in 1886, the Statue of Liberty rose in the harbor, welcoming millions more to the island's shores. The 20th century turned Manhattan into something the world had never seen. Steel-frame construction allowed buildings to soar. The Flatiron Building rose in 1902, followed by the Woolworth Building in 1913, briefly the tallest structure on Earth. The Roaring Twenties brought a frenzied skyline race. The Chrysler Building's Art Deco crown gleamed in 1930, only to be surpassed months later by the Empire State Building's 102 stories. Manhattan became the vertical city, a forest of towers rising from bedrock. The Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s and 1930s made uptown Manhattan the cultural capital of Black America. Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, and Zora Neale Hurston created art that redefined American culture. Meanwhile, Wall Street drove the global economy and crashed it spectacularly in 1929, plunging the world into the Great Depression. Midtown Manhattan became the headquarters of American power after World War II. The United Nations set up on the East River. Madison Avenue invented modern advertising. Broadway became synonymous with live theater. Times Square pulsed with neon. But on September 11, 2001, the unthinkable happened. 2 hijacked planes struck the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, killing nearly 3,000 people and leaving a wound in the skyline and the soul of the city. Manhattan mourned, but Manhattan endured. One World Trade Center now stands 1,776 feet tall at the site, a deliberate echo of America's founding year. Today, over 1.6 million people live on this 13-mile island, and millions more commute in daily. Manhattan remains what it has been for centuries, a place where ambition, diversity, and reinvention collide on a tiny strip of land between 2 rivers.